Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at a different independent role-playing game. This week I'm taking a look at an updated re-release of a game that I covered in this series way back in 2016. Developed and published by Dungeoneering Studios, Castle Torgeath Redux was released on February 21st, 2020. Castle Torgeath Redux is a simple first-person action RPG set in the dungeon of a castle, supposedly inspired by games like Hexen. The RPG elements are admittedly pretty light, but are more substantial than in some games I've played, and gameplay largely involves running around dungeon tunnels and rooms, fighting enemies, and obtaining loot. In terms of plot, you are a battle mage whose party has left him behind in order to explore a castle. Wanting in on the expedition's findings, you head to the ruins only to have the entrance collapse behind you. Now you have to press forward in hopes of either catching up with the expedition or finding an alternate exit. Once past the basic introduction, the player is dumped directly into the dungeon. Interface is minimal, with your character's equipped weapon and torch held before you. In the upper right is a map which can be zoomed in or turned off. In the lower left are your status gauges. There are bars for health, stamina, also called hunger, and mana. Then indicators for your torch's fuel level and a morph fog indicator. Health is pretty standard, reducing when you take damage and may be increased by drinking potions. Mana reduces when you cast spells and may be regained through mana potions or mana statues. Stamina goes down when you run around or swing your weapon and may be increased by eating food. The torch goes down with time and may be refueled by clicking on torches found on the walls. Finally, the morph fog increases with time and may be dropped by killing morph monsters, which are tough creatures that spawn out of monsters that you kill when the morph fog is full. These minotaur-like creatures can be a bit challenging, but all seem to drop a piece of treasure each time you drop one, and with adequate reflexes you can take them down with minimal effort. Additionally, characters have 4 basic stats. Strength impacts melee damage, dexterity impacts range damage and movement speed, willpower impacts magic damage and mana, while constitution impacts your maximum health and overall stamina or hunger. You gain experience by killing monsters, and at certain totals you gain a level, which grants an additional attribute point to place amongst your 4 main stats. Inventory basically has a number of different categories. You start with a steel sword and the fireball spell and may uncover more weapons during play. However, this is done slowly, and there are only a handful of weapons that you can acquire overall, much akin to a game like Hexen rather than a typical RPG. There's no need to equip things, you can just cycle through the weapons as you might in a first-person shooter. Inventory also includes food that is used to regain stamina, keys that you uncover to unlock doors, clues or lore that you pick up, potions to restore your health and mana, loot that you can use to trade with various NPCs, and spells that you can select in order to cast. Of note is that loot in Castle Torgeath Redux is very abstracted. Things that you pick up can fall into a few general categories and are automatically added to those totals. Items of value, junk, rusted weapons, old gear, and tools are the main ones that you have at first, but as you proceed you can uncover things like mining tools, ore, and so forth. Very few have direct applications. For instance, any old fork, cup, hammer, or scythe you pick up are all considered tools and simply added into the tool category. Some NPCs may offer you to trade a potion or food for a certain number of tools, junk, or other items of value. I did find use for a few things. For instance, in certain places you can try to harvest ore or gemstones from exposed veins, and doing so requires a mining tool. But again, this is just a matter of trading one thing for another. You lose one mining tool to get a piece of ore. This can get a little bit silly in parts. For instance, around the 2nd level I started finding body parts that I could loot as a new gore category. I was literally carrying around like 4 dudes worth of random limbs and torsos, and I joked to somebody that I was chatting with at the time that I bet I find some guy that wants to trade me like a rusted crust of bread for these body parts. And you know what? Less than 2 minutes later, that's exactly what I found. Somebody wanted to trade me food for this gore that I picked up. Now, that having been said, I actually don't mind this degree of abstraction, amusing though it is. It's way better than having to sort through stacks of very specific items to fulfill trade-in quests and the like. Now, I've talked a lot about the inventory and not much about the gameplay, but that's mostly because the gameplay is incredibly simple. You move with the WASD keys and have a full range of movements so long as you stay on the floor. There's no ability to jump or climb. You interact with things with the E key, may block with your weapon, as well as swing it in a couple of other different ways.
Aside from that, it's just running around the dungeon, grabbing keys, finding clues, and fighting enemies. You just basically try to survive. Occasionally, you'll run into traps, which are honestly pretty startling and caught me way more times than I'd like to admit. In fact, sometimes I might say they're a little bit unfair, even though they're right there. It's not like these traps are hidden. It's just you turn around a corner, you're not really expecting to step on one. Anyway, there are no automatic health or mana regeneration methods, so managing potions is a little bit of a must. Certain spells and effects can cause visual effects that disorient you and change how you view the screen, but it's not really that impactful. Running out of torchlight can leave you stumbling around in the dark, which, can be a little bit more troublesome. Enemies are generally statically placed, but are not all immediately visible, and some of them simply teleport in. Spiders can drop down from the ceilings, rats can jump out of occasional crates, and skeletons can just hop up from the floor, and that can be a little bit jump scary at times and just startling, so you may want to watch that. There are a few instances where creatures will just spawn on top of you with no indication, although this is usually done as something that is maybe a little bit contextually relevant. For instance, if you walk into a room and there's some sort of magic circle on the ground, things may spawn out. There is the occasional NPC who can offer dialogue options to go through. This can inform you of events in the game and can also offer you a chance to trade for items. The trading interface takes a little getting used to, though, because it's not some separate barter screen. Rather, NPCs simply offer a series of potential trades which you can accept or decline in turn, and they can have several of these. As I mentioned before, this is usually in the form of offering a potion or a bit of food in exchange for some resource, like value in coins, a certain number of rusted weapons, or the aforementioned body parts. And thus it goes. You simply fight monsters, explore the dungeon, and gain experience, offering up limited loot for items to use. It's very simple for a dungeon crawler, but I guess it gets the job done. I will say that the maps are huge, and they can feel a little bit empty sometimes, and this is a complaint I had with the first game. There's a lot of walking around to get around to some encounters, at least at first. That can be a benefit in terms of keeping you from getting swarmed by creatures, although that does decrease the difficulty a fair bit, and it's already not a difficult game. Graphically, the 3D models are simple and a bit bland, honestly. I was not impressed at all with them. Likewise, the dungeons do have a lot of sameness within the same area. Less than in the original version of the game, but it's still there, and it can tend to getting lost. Other levels do have different looks and styles, so you can tell when you change a level, but that's about it. The music is passable, avoiding being too overbearing, although it's not particularly stand-up. I will say that I was surprised to see that Castle Torgeath Redux has full voice acting. That took me completely off guard, including the occasional comment or wisecrack from the main character. I do not know why that was a priority, honestly. The voice acting isn't great, but it's actually not that bad. It's just passable. I think it improves the experience overall, even the occasional random comment from the main character, and that's not something I usually enjoy. It's done sparingly enough that it doesn't become annoying. There is a certain humor in the writing, and like any humor, it can be a bit hit or miss. Overall, Castle Torgeath Redux is okay for a budget title. I did take a look at the original back in 2016, as I've mentioned. I found that one to be a fun but clunky entry that needed improvement. By comparison, Castle Torgeath Redux is a much more fluid and organized experience, at least from what I had back then, with much more responsive gameplay, but it can still be a little bit clunky in areas. I'm kind of leery about indie games that launch a quote-unquote redone version, especially when the prior version has only garnered mixed responses over time, but in this case I do feel that the improvements are notable, at least from my original experience. If you enjoy solo action dungeon crawls and can put up with the budget feel and the overall rather light touch of the RPG aspects, I honestly do recommend it for the price. Moreover, if you can get it on sale, that would make it more appealing. I do think it's a pretty decent improvement over the original version that I played way back in the day, but it's not really going to change your mind. And honestly, if you already own the original, I don't know that buying this one may be worth it. I don't know that it offers all that much better gameplay. On that note, I will wrap it up here. This has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday, Castle Torgeath Redux.
As always, I'll go ahead and leave a link to where you can pick it up in the description below. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye. And if you're still watching this far, I'd like to take a moment to thank those who have supported this channel via Patreon or direct donations throughout the years, without which this channel could not have lasted as long as it has. For those who are feeling particularly generous, you can still support my work through Patreon and now through Subscribestar as well, through the links in the description below.